create an experience around somebody's interests, their hobbies, their passions, or why they've come to London. I just think the creativity and the fun you can have around honing a very personal experience around a stay is more and more key nowadays. I think this sort of textbook greeting is no longer what people, certainly at the more luxury end of hospitality, are looking for. So I encourage my team to look for the signals. If somebody's just arrived and they said, I've had a lousy day, and see if you can get that glass of champagne up to their room before they do. So it's waiting for them as they walk in the room. It's just elements of spontaneity. I think that's such a key word, and it's very, very prominent in what we do here.
Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingser. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. Thank you to BizSimply for sponsoring this episode as our show partner. BizSimply is the all-in-one HR, workforce management, rota and operation software designed and built by hospitality experts to make every shift run like clockwork. And we join forces to help the industry to find new ways to become even more innovative in how we lead our people, how we operate, how we grow our businesses, to how we serve our customers. Together we want to share strategies and tools that can make the industry thrive long term, not just survive. And in this episode, I'm super excited to be talking with Andrew Coney, who is the general manager of the Harry London, which is a 5-star luxury hotel in Belgravia. And in the conversation we start with talking about how you build a great hotel that not only makes a profit, but also serves its people, the community it's part of, and impacts the planet positively. Andrew explains how they have navigated the pandemic and how it's been essential to them and putting their people first. Andrew talks about now they are focusing on making sure that they retain their people, and to do that, their key focus is on well-being and strengthen their culture through better work-life balance and mental health support. We dive into also the importance of giving you people a clear vision and some values and principles to operate after, so they can create these amazing customer experiences that is both unique and personal. Andrew talks about the importance of creating a workplace that actually gives people permission to operate. He says that people want to be involved and make decisions. He also talks about the importance of taking care of your people as they return, because they are a bit shaky after this winter's lockdown, and he shares what they have done to engage them through the lockdown, but also how they are focusing on now reconnecting them as a team as they come into the hotel. We also discussed the problems around the talent shortage, and especially around the challenges about there's not enough workforce in the UK to fill the positions due to Brexit, boosted by the pandemic. But he highlights that we really now have to take this seriously. We have to work on the reputation as an industry, and we need to get out there and change the position of how to work in hospitality is not only bad, there's lots of benefits to it. And also he said there's a really importance of reaching out to groups of people that maybe not before would have considered a career in hospitality. Along the way, we dive into personalization of the employee experience and guest experience, the power of working with charities, mental health, kindness and patience with people, making tough career decisions, the future of hospitality, and much more. But before you tune in, please sign up for our weekly newsletter on hospitalitymavericks.com, packed with more Maverick insights, strategies and tools. Now, grab a notebook, pen, coffee, and let's get started. We're going to be talking with an operator that's open and actually has probably been open most of the pandemic, but now starting to see London coming back to life. And I'm really interested in that conversation on a different level. First of all, thinking about how does business and hospitality and especially hotels come back into London, and how, because a lot of people have talked about maybe, some people said the death of London, which I don't believe, but there's been some quite extreme version of that. And then we're going to talk a bit about talent as well, because in the last couple of weeks, there's been circulating around a talent crisis potentially in hospitality for that. But I have a great guest for you today, a very experienced hotelier, Andrew Coney from the Harry in London. And welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Andrew, for people that doesn't know what the Harry is, and maybe a bit about your background as well, maybe it'd be good that you just give them like the elevator pitch about you and the Harry.
Well, the Harry is situated in the Belgravia district in London, probably one of the more exclusive parts of town, surrounded by embassies and a lot of the big retail like Harrods and Harvey Nichols. So it's a popular destination within town. We've got 85 rooms. We're owned by a company based in Hong Kong, and we've just in fact opened Harry in Hong Kong. Which is a larger property than us. It's 210 rooms, but we opened that in December, which was obviously a tough time to open in Hong Kong, but we've been bold and pressed ahead with it. So that's exciting for us through all the gloom of the past year. And you mentioned that we've been open. In fact, we've been pretty solidly shut up until last Monday. We opened for 3 months in the summer last year. We opened for that brief 11-day stint in December last year. And now we've just opened up again. So we've been through this stop, start. I've been around for a long time. As you can tell, the hair is a very significant indicator of that. I've worked predominantly in London, but have had roles overseas and across a number of different brands and styles. I've operated a 1,000-bedroom hotel, and I'm now operating an 85-bedroom hotel. So I've gone through some big contrasts, 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star. But I think I'm very much at home here. I'm loving being at the Harry. It's a great family atmosphere, not only with the ownership, but with also the team here. And I feel like it's very me.
How would you describe the Harry? What kind of hotel experience is this? You just said it's a smaller hotel. It's not a 1,000-bedroom hotel, a transaction hotel, as I call them, but it feels like a bit more like you're creating an experience at the Harry.
Probably a misused term in a lot of hotels, that it is a very much a home experience. It's very hospitable. And we try to ingrain in everybody that works here that you are giving every single person who comes here an individual experience. And because we're relatively small, we're able to pull that off. And another misused word is empowerment. And I think it's a very key part of the story here, that we really think every single member of the team should be empowered to create an experience around a guest. So if somebody is coming, we do what we call positive stalking, and we do a little bit of research on a guest and find out from their social media or from their company website or just whatever's out there. There's loads of information. And if you can create an experience around somebody's interests, their hobbies, their passions, or why they've come to London, we've created amphitheatres or theatres out of chocolate, with the 2 seats they're sat in for their visit to the theatre that night in a different colour chocolate. I just think the creativity and the fun you can have around honing a very personal experience around a stay is more and more key nowadays. I think this sort of textbook greeting is no longer what people certainly at the more luxury end of hospitality are looking for. So I encourage my team to look for the signals, look for, if somebody's just arrived and they said, I've had a lousy day, then see if you can get that glass of champagne up to their room before they do. So it's waiting for them as they walk in the room. It's just elements of spontaneity. I think that's such a key word, and it's very, very prominent in what we do here. So, we're a boutique hotel. There's no doubt about that. But I hope one that's taking the guest experience to another level, that it's way more personalized than perhaps the norm, nor is it intrusive. And when I talked about positive stalking, I know of an experience of somebody recently where they stayed in a hotel and there was a picture of their wife by the bed. And I just think that's creepy. That's just taking it to an extreme. So we do have kind of some parameters around it, but no rules. Do what is right by the guest.
That's very super interesting, because that's giving that permission to operate to people and giving them some clear guidelines where they can work within. How does the staff feel about that? Because I guess that's very different from the average norm of any workplace, not only in hospitality, but normally you have the rule set, the procedures and operating manuals that you're following to create that experience.
Well, you could have spent many hundreds of pounds staying the night here, and in the morning you come down, and I'm making this up as an example because it definitely wouldn't happen here, but you came down in the morning and you said that my shower was cold and my TV didn't work, and you're confronting a member of staff who's probably just into their 20s. And I'm empowering that person to turn around to you and say, well, I'm really, really sorry about that. I'm not going to charge you for last night. I want you to come back again. And there she's made that, or he's made that decision straight away. And not gone to a supervisor to get an answer, not gone to the extent of asking you to email in your complaint. I think we live in a world now with social media in particular that people can tell their story about their stay very, very quickly. And it can reach hundreds and thousands of people before they've even left the building. So it's important to have that, not just for that reason, but I think also so that people feel they've been dealt with and they've had a response. It's not something that's lingering, or you don't really care that much. You'd rather make it more complicated.
What do you put in place to make that happen? Because that's almost like a cultural thing. That's in the way how we do things here.
Well, you imagine we've got a tough director of finance here, and when I first started at the hotel and started spouting these ideas, you can imagine that doesn't sit very comfortably, and I think that. And to her credit, she totally buys into it. Culturally, you have to set the example. You have to show people that you can do it. So, a guest checks in and you hear that they particularly like reading a particular author. I'll go out and buy that next book by that author and bring it in and put it in their room with a little note from me. So you set the example. You don't discourage. Somebody gives away the penthouse for a night because there was a light bulb out. Okay, that was probably extreme, but you guide and you coax into a better solution. It's not something you can apply with a stick, and it's not something you can apply with a manual. And that's really my view on life. That this hotel's not about manuals and ways to do things. It's all about spontaneity. But culturally, people do struggle with it to begin with because they're scared that they're going to make the wrong call. But you create that comfort zone around them. You really, really pat them on the back when they do something amazing. And it then becomes almost competitive that everybody wants to do something just as good as the last person's idea.
Have you been inspired from somewhere through your journey as a leader, working that way? Because it's a very different way than command and control. It's that permission to operate. Where did you get your inspiration from? Because that's quite interesting.
I don't think I've ever been particularly conventional about style anyway. I don't think... I'd probably take that back to even when I was at school. I wasn't particularly, a follower of lots of rules. And therefore, my first ever experience in hospitality was to work for a lady who ran a hotel down in Cornwall. I think it was only about 15 bedrooms. And I worked there for some summer holidays. And she was so unconventional and so mischievous, I would say, that it just taught me that hospitality doesn't have to be stiff. Even if you're operating at the very top level and commanding some of the higher rates, you can still have a degree of mischief about you that people actually rather like. And it puts a smile on their face and they think, well, you know what, this is slightly different, and not outrageously so, but this is different. So I guess it's always, I've been through a number of hotel brands, and I've experienced the manual. I've experienced that mentality, and in big organizations, that's the way it has to be, or else you get no consistency. But in a small single operation like this, you can manage it, you can steer it, you can guide it, because you're very close to it.
Super interesting. So it actually comes from early of your experience at yourself, both an employee, but also seeing the guest actually enjoys that. And I think you're right. Creating those special moments is going to be more critical than at any time in our lifetime, because we've been, hungering to get out, to get experiences again. And we're almost going to get disappointed if it's not going to be something great, we're going to experience when we come out. What about, because I looked into you guys and you're doing some amazing work around charity as well. And I can see you're putting a lot of effort into that. Can you tell a bit more about that and what kind of impact that is making on the people you're working with, but also the for your organization?
Yes, I've always felt that any business, regardless of what corporately they may be required to do, you do it because you think it's the right thing to do, and it's probably sounds like a negative term, but it's a great distraction. It takes us away from our day-to-day routine, and gives us something to focus on that has a great positive energy around it. So we've supported a number of charities in my time here, and we try to vary them. And not stick with just one thing in particular. So over the years, we've also moved on to other charities. And I guess it comes across in two different ways. One is we're all quite emotive about children's charities, for example. So when we ask the team here, what charities do you want to support? That's always one of the very top ones on the list. So we've worked very closely with a hospital here in London. We've also worked with a place just outside of London, which deals with children with either born with brain injuries or have suffered brain injuries through accident. And I tell you what, you go there and you spend some time there with the kids, and it just takes your breath away because it's exhausting, but it's so rewarding. And you take a group of the team here who've never ever been involved in anything like that before in their time, and it just opens their eyes. And I think it's a great way of sort of developing people and stimulating people and taking them to another level. And then I also work very closely with a charity called Born Free, so we at the hotel support them quite a bit with events and with some fundraising. I was lucky; they invited me up to go on one of their projects once, which was to Cameroon, to a gorilla orphanage. So one day you're managing a hotel and you're wondering where all the teaspoons have gone, and are we going to make occupancy tonight? And why does he not want to work with her today? And then all of a sudden, the next day, you're at Heathrow Airport flying out to a gorilla orphanage, which was really something else. So I actually put that out to everybody that sometimes charity work can seem a little onerous and just like a tick box thing. But you know what? It can actually deliver an experience like that I got. So there's nothing stopping anybody from enjoying, benefiting from that. And I even had a member of my team who then went to a number of team members have done the Kilimanjaro climb, and one went to Sri Lanka to an elephant orphanage. So it's there's a little bit of give and take sometimes in charity work, and they can do things for you just as much as you can do for them.
It's almost like a charismatic view on leadership. It's like, when you give something without expecting anything back, you often get it in tenfold without knowing it. So give more than you take actually out of, the world, your communities and your people.
Completely agree. Today, we've just launched an initiative that we're doing with some young artists. Art's very big to the Harry. We change all our artwork in our public areas every 3 to 4 months. And during lockdown, we felt really concerned for a lot of the graduates in London art schools because they weren't getting the opportunity to showcase at their graduation ceremonies. So we put a lot of their artwork up around the hotel. And interestingly, quite a few pieces have been sold, even while we've been locked down. And then today, we've just taken in 2 young artists as artists in residence. And they're going to be here over the next few weeks, just having a space to do some art and get them out of their house and just take them somewhere else where they can get some fresh stimulation. So, we're really excited about that. And we will do then a showcase for them of the work they've done here.
It seems like small thing in the grand scheme of things, but these are amazing opportunities for young people. And I could imagine artists that has not been able to go out and show their art really must be under pressure. That's a really great. Yes, there's a lot of work going on. There's not like there's a 3 lines under. It's not like clear results, but actually definitely influence your culture and the business as whole. What about getting ready for opening, or what we call this period we're in now? And some people, as you said, they've been on off all year. Do you think, first of all, we are back now and now we open, or should we actually think, in business there could be another time where they switch off the light, the government, and say, well, we need to go back inside?
If I thought that, I would think I was extremely pessimistic. I'm an optimistic person. My glass is always, as I say, it's not even half full. It's brimming over, and I think that the stop-start that we have been through in the last year has been horrendous. It's been very tough on people in hospitality because they are, I put it that they're almost performers. They're out there doing what they do, and that's what they get their energy from, the feedback they get from the guest, the feedback they get from the customer. And it's very stifling, locking them up for long periods of time and then just suddenly expecting them to come back the next, one day and just suddenly do it all over again and be very good at it. I think in the summer it was a lot easier because a lot of people were quite refreshed by the sunshine and had some time to energize. The winter one has been extremely tough. And, I've seen people come back who, it's just taken a little bit longer to warm up and get themselves back into it. It's, I think that the winter lockdown was pretty brutal, frankly. Early darkness, cold weather, people not being able to go out. It's played its toll on a lot of people.
How are you prepared? You're talking about taking your people coming back. How are you prepared for that? What have you put in place because a lot of people are talking about that now, that when people come back, we need to open from one day to the other, but how do we actually get them ready to this?
We've tried to keep them very engaged throughout anyway. So we've done all sorts of virtual activities from meditation and yoga to coffee tastings, cocktail tastings, even to sort of crazy things like escape rooms, which you can do on Zoom as well. So there's been a real broad raft of activity to try and keep people, connected and be able to talk to one another. But it's very strange when you bring them all back into the building and they've not seen one another in months. Just trying to sort of reconnect everybody is tough. It's really tough. But I say in the summer it was a lot easier. It's always been our notion that you get people back a few days beforehand, start getting prepared. Don't just expect them to land on their feet on day one and suddenly be confronted by people walking through the door. You've got to give them a bit of an opportunity to build up and get back into situ. The most important thing is to spend some time with everybody. And that's always been my attitude, that I should go and talk to every single individual, almost quite formally, and just say, how do you feel? How do you feel about being back? Maybe they really don't want to get on public transport. Maybe they just don't want to be amongst people again. And we've got to be here to kind of react to that and help people through that. It's certainly my sense that even the slightest sort of nuance and change of behavior is something you've got to be more tolerant of. If somebody's a little bit snippy, a little bit, short-tempered, that's probably as a result of, if they weren't like that 3-4 months ago, then why are they like that now? Because they're probably finding some anxiety about being back. So it's all something that I'm very clear with all my heads of department here, that let's just be very patient and listen and help as best we possibly can. And, we've got various options in terms of what we can do to support people.
What is your plan to, because 2021, I almost see like a transition year, especially for our industry, that things are coming back up. You say you're optimistic. We will not have them switching out the light again. What is your plans to navigate that? Because it's a very different, I guess, market situation you're coming back to as you switch everything on again.
I guess we're reasonably lucky because of where we're located. I mean, I think of hotels over in the city where so many firms have no intention of returning their people there just yet. And you think of all those hotels, bars, restaurants, even sandwich bars that have got a very, very precarious months, maybe the rest of this year ahead of them. I hear, we've benefited already in the 2 weeks we've been open. We've seen sort of a fairly good sort of reaction from people that do want to travel on business, and certainly for the terrace that we've got open, it's outside, it's been packed. What do I think for the future? I'm a little bit nervous about what happens when overseas holidays are suddenly opened up. And does that mean the staycation starts to lose its momentum? And that, yes, I get it that the UK resorts are already pretty well full. But if you've got the choice of a week in Mallorca or a long weekend in London, what are you going to choose if you've been yearning for some sunshine and some sea? So I think that may play as a bit of a challenge to us over the summer. So we're going to have to work very, very hard for the staycation business. I just don't see a surge of people coming in from overseas. I think we've just got to be as optimistic as possible and do whatever we can to then start trying to stimulate some of that international business in the sort of probably tail end of Q3 and into Q4. Did you notice I had my hands together then? It was almost like I was in prayer.
Yeah, and I was almost doing it myself. I was almost, as you were saying things,
It was unintentional, but there you go.
I think we both are praying. So if we go on from that, we are in this opening mode and things are moving on and things are looking positive. There's a lot of people that talks about that there's a talent crisis on its way to hospitality in general across the globe. A lot of people in the UK talk about London as a regional challenge. It's going to be very interesting to hear you view this as an operator. And they talk about there's not enough, labor to get the job done, both in restaurants and hotel. What is your view on the hospitality and the talent crisis? Is there one?
I think crisis is a very strong word. And I really hope we're not heading towards a crisis, but I do think we have a big problem. Fundamentally, we saw a lot of businesses letting people go last year, and a huge number of those people returned home to wherever that may have been, particularly in Europe. And we were all operating on sort of skeleton staffs to get through the short periods of time we were open. But we're now facing a summer ahead of us, and you can sense in London that food and beverage in particular is really taking off, and people are advertising for positions, and you only have to look on a lot of sites now, and there's a lot of roles out there. So it'll become very competitive, and there could be some interesting things, and some play comes into salaries and wages, and what people start offering just to try to win the fight, so to speak. But it's particularly unnerving when you, for example, we have an Italian restaurant here, and our chef wanted to bring an ex-colleague of his over from Italy, and had to ask the question, does he have settled status? No. And therefore, it looks like with some considerable cost, it's also going to take about 3 months. And how can you do that on a multiple level? And we're just talking about one individual. So I do think there's some huge challenges ahead of us, and as an industry, we should collectively sort of start to either lobby for some support around that. Because it's just going to leave, scenarios where you can't cover, and there'll be days where restaurants aren't open because they can only cover certain periods of the week, and that would be pretty tragic. Particularly in hotels where you have to operate anyway. You can't come and stay in a hotel and be told that the restaurant's shut on a particular day. You can't have breakfast, for example. I mean, that's just beyond belief. I think we've also got to do a lot of work to try to stimulate more interest in the hospitality sector as an employer. And haven't we been beating on about that since I was probably, first starting in this industry? Its reputation, its image, its credibility out there. I think I told you before that I went to a grammar school down in Kent, and a few years ago they asked me to go and do the presentation of prizes, which I was a bit taken aback by, because my career path, in fact my educational path, wasn't entirely conventional. And so they asked me to go and present the prizes, and I presumed they'd had a cancellation because the year before it was the guy who beat the land speed record. And then this year, I'm stood in front of this audience of parents and their children, and you can tell they all wanted them to be lawyers, doctors, bankers. Those were the chosen professions. And there's this guy standing here telling my little boy that he should become a caterer. Good grief. And, by the time I'd finished, it was very interesting that people were coming up to me afterwards and saying, I never ever thought about it. You glamorized the whole industry. You made it sound a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting, and broke some of the perceptions of it, that it's so low paid that we wouldn't even think about it. So, there's work to be done in terms of just getting that message better out there, and then engaging. I was talking to Kensington and Chelsea Council last week about, how do we get some of those people who've not worked ever, but are in very deprived areas, and actually have got the attitude and the aptitude to come and work in a hotel and learn and do some great things. So I think we've got to start being less sort of traditional about our approach about where we look for people, or only assume that if they haven't worked in a 5-star hotel, they're not going to come and work in a 5-star hotel.
Quite interesting you said with that you can only operate a couple of days, because that has been I've been talking with a guy over in Australia, and he talks about this is the case now. There's some restaurants they open in 3 days, and actually their sign-on fees for people, they're so high that almost you already know you are running your labor cost at a very negative point of view, because you maybe pay £500 to get just a frontline staff. onboarded, and it doesn't mean that you keep them, but you already spent that money up front, £1,000, and the same is happening in the US, especially in Florida. Apparently, that should be a big issue around talent. So yeah, it's very interesting. What did because you have a special culture? Have you thought about something extra you're gonna do to actually try to to respond to that as an employer, and make sure that maybe also you retain those good ones you have, your key people?
Well, so far so good. The churn hasn't been enormous. It's pretty isolated that where people have decided they want to move on. But nonetheless, I think we do embody a great culture here, and I think people know good things about working here. I think you're always looking and searching for fresh ideas about how to further develop them. We put into situ last year online development program so that people can log in from home and explore whatever they want to learn, as well as the more statutory stuff that we ask them to do. And I think that people just want to grow. And, whether you can support them, we've done language training here in the past. I think, if somebody's got a particular interest, do the most important thing, which is give them some time to pursue what they want to do. And whether it's sporting, whether it's family, or whether it's educational, we have to create that balance. And it's another expression, work-life balance. Haven't you heard people bleat on about that for years and years and years? But who actually really makes it happen? And I know it's pressurized. I know it's very difficult in hospitality because we have to put certain demands on people's time, but give it back as well.
Yeah, and I guess also there's a lot in the industry talking about now as people come back. As you said, some people need a bit more calibration, but I also think there's probably also as employers need to think about there's some mental health challenges, because it's been a tough year for anyone, no matter your financial status. It's just been a year that really have shaken us all up, and really challenged us, maybe not known since the war, as my dad said. And he was a child in the war. So he said, it felt like that time we were going through. Even worse, we just couldn't leave our house at any point.
No. Sometimes we're a little, we forget about those times. And, that went on for, a good 4 to 5 years in a lot of instances. So they had it a lot tougher then. And I guess we're a little sanitized to that sort of scenario. And I'm particularly concerned about the really younger ones, even people who are not even working yet. I'm really concerned about how people are just losing their youth, and how will that affect them in years to come when they do start searching employment and when they do get into employment. We as a whole world have to start to approach this in a very different way. And I was talking about tolerance earlier and patience. It's something that we probably, again, need some better guidance on. People's well-being is a very delicate thing, and taking it for granted, or, if you'd talked to me about well-being a year ago, I probably would have said, yeah, I think we're sending somebody on a course to do that. Now I'm passionate about it, and I just really, really would like to think that the industry would be passionate about it. But, we're in an industry that 10 years ago, if you'd said something to somebody about well-being, they just said, get on with it, just get back to work, stop whining. And, we live in a very different world now. And this pandemic has really, really affirmed to me that we've got to be much kinder people. And hospitality is kind by nature. And yet people apply for jobs on LinkedIn and we don't reply to them, or people send you their CV and we just put it in the bin. It's, that's not kind. And that's where we've got to start to change. There are a lot of people out there, we talk about a jobs crisis, but there are plenty of people out there who haven't got a job. And they might be in more specialist fields, but they're desperate to work. And yet we don't treat them particularly well. It doesn't take too much just to send an email back saying, sorry, on this occasion, you're not successful. But that's I think where we've got to all start, taking an inward look and say, are we behaving to our best towards people who are probably in very much worse circumstances than us.
I really agree, and I think that's outside our work as well. It's like that patience, as you said, actually fun. That word has actually become. I always choose a word for the year, and that's actually my word this year. Patient, and it's with everything, because you last year I felt I lost a bit of that, patient, because it was like so difficult. So you just get trying to push things through, but you can't, because you need to have patience with the flow of the world in a way. So. If you look back now, Andrew, after this year, is there anything you wish you'd have known before you started your career? If you had like a crystal ball, you could have looked into that point? Because you said you didn't take a conventional route to things as well.
I've never regretted anything. If I could have known something that was coming, uh, I would never have not done this. And I'm incredibly happy. I mean, a lot of people have said to me, why didn't you pursue something further, like regional operations director or something like that, or MD of a group or something like that? It's just not me. So what I came in to do is what I hope I'll end doing. This is all getting a bit morbid, but I'm a very hospitable person. I like being in those sort of circumstances where you're creating fun. Like I said earlier, a little bit of mischief. And being in a sort of ops director role where people are just phoning you day in, day out to tell you that, the boilers have packed up, or, they've just, they've run out of water or something like that. I don't want to hear everybody's problems like that. I'd rather deal with my problems here in the hotel, and just run a ship that I think most importantly is that you're then sending people out who are learning from you and hopefully taking a piece of you into whatever they do next. So hopefully I'm the spreader of much mischief as years to come.
Have you had any like big learnings on the way? Like that was like something that really changed the course of me as a leader.
I reached a point in London. I had been pretty London centric for a number of years. And I got to a point where I was working in a hotel group that had a lot of outside of London properties. And I thought, I don't particularly want to carry on in London. I think I've done London. And I went to work in a hotel up in Northumberland with that group, which was in like 1,000 acres, had 2 golf courses, very idyllic. And I moved my family up there, and we all moved up there, and it became sort of very much I'm only 2 minutes away from the hotel, and it was such a difference to being in London, where I just didn't sense that I was seeing my kids enough, or my wife, that I was spending too much time in London and not enough time at home. So we moved lock, stock and barrel up there, and it didn't take a great deal of time that I started to think it's not really me. I did stay for 3 years, and I really enjoyed it, but my heart always sensed I was meant to be back in London. And it was a very defining sort of moment, because it meant I had to eventually make that decision. And I've left my family up there, and I now spend most of my time down here, but go back periodically, weekends, not always, but mostly, and spend time with my wife and kids. And it's tough because, you've made a career decision there. That means that on the first place, you went there to spend more time with your family, and then you reverse the decision to spend very little time with your family. So you've got to compensate. I hope they're never going to watch this, because they'll be hugely embarrassed. But you do try to compensate when you go home and spend more natural time with them, rather than just sort of sitting on the sofa watching TV. But I would say that to anybody: if you're making career decisions, contemplate what the ramifications are further down the line. It may sound very exciting and very glamorous, but it could turn on its head, and value your family time.
Any people that's been influential to you on the journey, like these has been your mentors, inspirations that you maybe still use as to connect with when you have difficult times?
At present company, in terms of people I work with now, I have the most phenomenal people I work for in Hong Kong. The Haralela family, they're just amazing. So you need something, they're there for you, but they don't sort of encroach upon your day-to-day routine, which is extraordinary and very lucky. We live in a world now where the transition that's happened in the last few years has been that we've moved from if you work for an organization, predominantly you work for that organization, whereas now more and more the ownership is taking more and more control. So you could be working in a big branded hotel, and yet you're very accountable to the owner, which you wouldn't necessarily have been a few years back. And therefore, that's made, as general managers, that management of relationships so more critical and sometimes very difficult. But in terms of influences I've had in the past, when you start in the industry, I talked about the lady who, when I first started, while I was still at school, she was a great person for showing you what hospitality meant. That when you go into the bar, go and sit with somebody and buy them a drink if there's somebody that it's going to be a sensible move to do. They're a regular guest or whatever. And that's me at like 15 learning that's really, really critical. And I've carried that ever since. But then I worked for somebody called Patrick Dempsey, who worked most recently. He's left now, but he was running Premier Inn. At the time, he was my food and beverage manager in what was the Cumberland Hotel. And I was a very fresh-faced, young kind of trainee. And he just induced a sort of energy and spirit that, if you want to be successful, you're going to have to outshine all these other trainees. So, prove that you're the best of the lot of them. And it was extraordinary. And I've always encouraged anybody coming into the industry, and it's one of those telling pieces of advice. Don't just be another person that thinks that just by going through the process, I'm going to be successful. Go up to that manager and say, you know what? I think that could be done slightly better. But if you don't mind, I'm not insulting what you're doing, but can I just do a little project on it and come back and present a paper to you? And how rarely do you hear that these days, where people just take a little bit of initiative and then you think, wow, this person's got something in them which is really making them shine above all of the rest. And that's what I say to all people that are on like apprenticeships or training schemes, or even just, in a very, first position type of scenario. Try to excel by just coming up with some fresh ideas. It makes such a difference.
How do you actually, Andrew, especially in the year we've gone through, I've asked this question to almost every guest we had. How do you actually show up strong every day? Because, you're the leader of the ship, and the crew is not waiting for your command, because you're already told that you give them permission to operate, but they're looking for the energy. And I don't know, in a leadership role, it takes a lot of energy. And you said that yourself as well, because you also have to travel away from your family. There's a lot of energy that has to be used. How do you make sure you have energy every day on a high level? How are you in your impact zone, if I can phrase it like that?
I think being the boss of any business, it's quite lonely, and therefore you could get quite introspective about life and lose that energy, because who's giving it to you? But I think it's just not my style to wander around looking miserable. It's just not me, and I guess I'm very lucky like that. I mean, they do occasionally refer to Andrew's BMM, which is Andrew's Bad Mood Monday, which apparently once in a while I may come in and be just a little bit like a little testy on a Monday morning, but that's fine. But at least they're making a joke of it. And at the end of the day, I think we're a very collaborative team here. And when I need to assert, I assert, and when we can have some fun, I'm right at the forefront.
Do you have any tricks to how you get that energy? Are you hacking? How do you hack yourself to get over those bad times?
You've just got to be realistic with yourself. I mean, if you've ever got to give somebody a dressing down, for example, you've got to taste of somebody, you didn't do well there, or you've done a bad job there. It's never personal. And I think that's the thing with me, that, 2 minutes later, we're over it. I've told you what I thought. Now let's move on. And I'm very much the same about myself. If I think that I've just been, a little bit grumpy on a Monday morning, then snap out of it, because everybody's watching you. And if the word's going around the building that he's grumpy today, then it's really unhelpful. So you start to realize when there's nobody around, you can't find anybody, and then it starts to tell you, yeah, you know what, maybe moderate that and cheer up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. A good idea because we have to, especially in the times we have been through, and it's like that. How do you switch yourself out of that kind of mode because it's very destructive, as you say, between the lines. What it would be your in the last question here today? What would be your top 3 advice to other leaders out there bringing back their hospitality business or any kind of business they're bringing back? What were your top 3 advice to them right now?
I would guess make sure you're surrounding yourself with quality. It's a dangerous thing to slip into, that you allow some mediocrity around you. That particularly if it's not something that's in your core strengths. So if it's great if you've got a balanced team, obviously, but don't allow weakness to bring you down. I think reputation is another key thing. Just make sure that you're telling some great stories about the place. Get the social media really active, because that's been a huge help to us. Even things like Tripadvisor, just pay some time and attention on that, because it does make a difference, and we've certainly noticed it here. And it gives it something everybody to channel their focus on. That we're all excited about this. We've moved up another position. Come on, let's keep going. Let's keep going. What else can we do? What other ideas have we got? Because it's that way back to the beginning of our conversation about spontaneity. That if we're all just doing the same old things, if I ever saw somebody take a fruit basket up to a room, with a pineapple in it, and think that a guest is going to be wowed by that, it's just no. Please no. So I would really encourage people just to sort of inject some uniqueness into what they do. It's really key. And I guess the third thing would be just let everybody breathe. Don't be on their backs the whole time. Let people do what they've got to do and let them shine. More often than not, people who are constrained will just deliver rather robotic service, and sometimes let them make mistakes and don't kill them for it. It's really important that people are themselves. We're a people hospitality business, and if we really wanted to make it all robotic, well then let's do that, and let's just have automated check-in and conveyor belts to take people here, there, and everywhere. I mean, I think the whole prospect of that is pretty grim. So just let people breathe.
Great, that's some great advice there, Andrew. Especially I like the one, let them breathe, because we have to be careful we don't run in and just think we are back as usual. Where can people find out more about the Harry and yourself? Where is the best place to go?
Well, if they just look up the harry.com on our website, that's the best place. There's plenty of information about the hotel, and there's contact details there. And if they want to message me direct, if they just go on the info contact line, the message will come to me.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming here on the show and telling your stories, insights, and wisdoms. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that learned a lot today. So sending you and the team all the power and energy you need as you're going through the next period of transformation, we can say.
Thank you, Michael.
Amazing, Andrew. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and insight on how to build a great employee experience that wows the customers, but also builds a healthy bottom line. If you want to learn more about how you get competitive edge through your employees, I would recommend you to visit episode 87 with Deepak Gori, the CEO of Le Bourg Hotels and Resorts, and he will be talking about emotional touchpoints. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share, rate, review, or subscribe to one of our channels. A big thank you to BizSimply for supporting us, bringing great insights, strategies, and tools to help the industry thrive, not just survive. Check them out at bizsimply.com or on their social at BizSimply or BizSimplyHQ. You can also email them directly on advice@bizsimply.com. A big thank you to Fina Charlson, who is the show producer and editor from the Podcast Collective. Tune in next time for another interview, and in the meantime, find out more about us and subscribe to the community and download free leadership tools at hospitalitymavericks.com. And don't worry, if you didn't get all of this, there will be links in the show notes. Thank you, and be Maverick.